Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have a layout that I made for both 30 days of sketches and a punched out Thursday to die for. And I showed you in the beginning some of the punches and the die that I used for this layout. Today's sketch for Christy's Beautiful Life, 30 Days of Sketches, is by Laura Rumble from Scrap Sketches. And I'll leave the sketch in the upper left-hand corner. The Dotty About Flair prompt for today is stencils. I'm starting out the layout with a beautiful older collection from Prima called Georgia Blues. I haven't really used this collection too much, but in a little while you'll see the photo that I'm using, and there was some blue and white in the background, and it made me remember this collection was on my shelf and that I hadn't used it as often as I should have. So I pulled the collection out, and this is what I use for my pattern papers, and I do some fussy cutting of some of the pattern papers and make some embellishments. So I'm following the sketch here, and I'm layering two pieces of paper on top of each other. I'm using the dark floral paper in the background, and of course I cut away the part that won't be seen because that's the majority of the paper. And then I also use this beautiful off-white paper with lots of gold accents. I wanted to add a border around the off-white paper, and I use a Stampin Up punch. I love the way it's a very delicate scallop, and so I thought that would be perfect in white for around the border of the off-white paper. Where the two border strips meet on the upper left-hand corner, I cut one of the borders on a approximately 45-degree angle to kind of make it look like the corner of a frame. Now I'm going to start layering some papers to go behind the photo. I have my photo mounted on some white cardstock. The photo is 4 by 4 inches. The piece of paper that is a square with the scalloped edge, that's made with a die that I have in my stash, and I thought that that scalloped edge would look nice with the scalloped edge that I use for the border punch. I used some distress ink in Vintage Photo, and I inked the edges of the piece of pattern paper. And now I'm going to pop up my photo. I'm not going to pop up that whole unit though. I'm just going to pop up the photo and the white mat that's around it. So I pieced together some scraps of fun foam that were in my drawer. And now I'm adding some ATG adhesive to the foam. And then I attach the photo down to the die cut and the pattern paper. So as you could see, because the die cut is white, it matches in with the background and it's kind of hard to see. So I wasn't sure how I was going to use this blue paper, but I knew I wanted to use this blue paper to make the photo pop. And once I placed this whole cluster on top of the dark paper, I decided that I was going to cut around the outside of the blue paper so that it would be backing that die cut almost like it's a cut file. Now I'm going to add a lot of leaves to the layout. It's something that I love to do whenever I have florals on my layouts. I add a huge number of leaves. So I used some punches that were in my stash and I punched out some leaves. And although I love dies, it's so much quicker to punch things out. So I really like to have these punches on hand. Two of them are Martha Stewart punches, and one of them is a punch from a company called Emagination. And that's actually my favorite punch because it's a very delicate leaf. The stem is very delicate. And I prefer that a little over the Martha Stewart punches where the stem is a little bit thicker. I used all three dies and I punched quite a few leaves out of some green pattern papers that I had scraps of in my stash. I thought that color green that I used went well with the Georgia Blues Prima paper that I'm using. And then I inked the edges of all of those leaves and also some flowers that I fussy cut out from the pattern papers. Now I'm adding some modeling paste to the background. As I mentioned, the Dotty About Flair prompt for today is stencils, so I wanted to make sure that I use some stencils on my layout. And I'm using this Prima stamp with some Brea Reese metallic modeling paste. It's not super metallic, but there is a bit of a shimmer to it. I'm not really sure where I'm going to put all the elements on the layout, so I'm just putting some of the modeling paste in different areas on the background. Because it's white on white, it's not going to be super noticeable. It'll just add some texture, so I'm not too worried about where I'm putting the modeling paste for this layout. While I'm letting the modeling paste dry, I thought I would add a little bit of extra detail to the photo cluster. I'm using some self-adhesive pearls, and I'm placing one at the base of each of the, I guess you could call them loops of the scallop, and I think that will help draw some attention to the photo cluster. Now the modeling paste has dried thoroughly, and I'm attaching the two background papers to each other. I didn't use my heat gun to dry the modeling paste because I wanted to be very careful about not buckling this pattern paper. Since it has the modeling paste on it, I wouldn't try to put it through my laminator. It might be possible, but I wouldn't attempt that. So when it was dry, it went right back to being flat again. And that's the only drawback of using the heat gun, is that it will warp the paper, and I like to put the paper through a laminator when possible, but in this case, like I said, I didn't want to try that. So I don't know if you noticed on the sketch, but I was very, very excited on this sketch that it has photo corners on it. So I thought, perfect sketch for me. So I added some photo corners, one of my favorite embellishments. I use an EK Success punch to punch out the photo corners, and I added those to just two corners of my photo. Now I'm working on the title. And just like in the sketch, I wanted to use a large script title, so I used my Silhouette Cameo and I cut out this title, Friends. I tried a couple of different sizes, and this one fit best on the layout. I'm using a stencil with some Distress Oxide. I started off with Prize Ribbon, and although this stencil is of flowers, you really can't tell that it's flowers when you look at it on this title. But that's okay. I was just kind of testing out to see how this would look. I knew that I wanted the title to be blue, and I thought that using the stencil first would just add a little bit of interest to the title. It wouldn't just be a flat color. So I inked the whole title, and in addition to inking the surface, I also put a little bit of extra ink on the edges. And inking the edges doesn't turn out to be very noticeable, probably because I'm using the same color. I just thought if I put a little bit extra, it would look a little darker. And it does slightly, but not enough to be super noticeable. And I haven't mentioned that the photo is of my older daughter Danielle and her college roommate. And they are still very good friends, and college has been out for a couple of years now, and they still get together, which I think is awesome. I really like her roommate. She's a very sweet girl. So I tried the title back on the layout, and I wasn't really super thrilled with the Prize Ribbon color. It was a little bit too bright. It's not a super bright color, but it was a little bit brighter than the pattern papers. So I went back in with some Chip Sapphire, and I added some Chip Sapphire, and that kind of obliterated the whole stencil look, but that's okay. I wanted it to be a little bit darker. And then I was thinking I wanted to add some kind of texture, so now I'm using a Tim Holtz stencil. I think this is called Dot Fade, with just some regular Liquitex modeling paste, and so I added a little bit of texture to the title. I cut out two more of the same title, and I'm adding some glue, and I'm going to layer them on top of each other, and this just makes the title a little bit more substantial, and it makes it have a little bit of dimension. Not too much dimension, but just a little bit. But if you want your title to be thick, you can definitely cut out more layers, and the more layers, the thicker it is, and it will look like chipboard if you layer enough paper on top of each other. So I'm still not happy with the blue, so I just took the whole ink pad and I'm rubbing that on just a couple of different places on the title, and ultimately this really just ended up making the modeling paste blue instead of white, but I like that. I think that it still has texture, but now the entire title is blue. And by the way, I'm working on a Creative Memories self-healing mat, and I don't necessarily recommend using inks on that mat, but the Distress Oxides come right off of this mat. If you use other ink pads, that might not be the case. Probably the best thing to use here is a glass mat, but that creates a lot of reflection when I use it for videos, so I've been using this mat when I use the Distress Oxides. And now I applied glue to the entire surface of the white title, and now I'm layering the blue title on top of it, and I'm trying to be very careful to line up the edges of all of the layers. And now I'm working on the dot for the eye, and I layer 3 dots on top of each other, glue them together, and now I'm just rubbing those dots on the ink pad, and then I use the dauber to get the spot that I couldn't get using the ink pad. And then I put the dot on the layout, but I accidentally dot the N instead of the I. I don't end up attaching it down. I never even noticed that I did this until I started making the video. What happens is the dot falls off of the layout, and when I put it back on, I put it in the right spot. Well, now I'm spreading those fussy cut flowers around the layout and just trying to figure out where I want to place them. For a while, I have a chipboard bird on the lower right-hand side of the layout, but I don't end up using that bird for the layout. I just couldn't find the right spot for it. And then I realized that I didn't have the photo in the right spot. I wanted to put it more toward the lower right-hand corner, the way it is in the sketch. So I moved that down, and I continue to arrange those flowers, and I'm going to attach them right down to the layout once I have them where I want them. So I use ATG adhesive, and I go around the layout, and I attach not only the flowers, but I also attach my photo down now that I know where the title's going to go and I can figure out the right spot for it. Because I moved the title down to the right, I didn't want to have anything to the right of the photo. I just felt that it would look too squished. So I moved all the flowers to other areas on the layout. And now I'm finishing up the title. I want to call this layout True Blue Friends. I thought that was kind of cute since the whole layout is blue. Well, it's blue except for the green leaves that I'm adding right now. I line up the title off camera. It takes me a long time when I'm putting down thickers to get it just right. And those small letters, those are American Crafts thickers. And I love that size. I wish I had those thickers in every color, and I wish I had a big stash of them. I just absolutely love that size thicker. It's a great way to add some text to your layouts or expand on your title. The largest leaves on the layout are the ones that I made using the Emagination punch, and I think that they're really pretty and really delicate. I really like that punch, and I think that it's nice to have 3 different punches, 3 different types of leaves that look slightly different. I think that it's better than having all of the same exact size on the page. It just makes it more interesting and makes it easier to create clusters. I finish adding the leaves to the various clusters, and then I use some gel glue and I attach them down. And in general, I'm putting the gel glue behind the flowers, and I'm not gluing the entire leaf down to the page. I also use some gel glue on the back of the title, and I coat the entire back of the title with the gel glue, and I moved it off of the layout because I didn't want to get glue all over the background by accident. And then even though it's hard to tell, I was very careful about where I placed the title on the layout because once the glue dries, you can't really move it around. I felt that the layout was almost done, but there was just something missing. I asked my daughter Danielle what she thought I should add to the layout, and she said, well, maybe you could add some pearls somewhere else on the layout. So I love these Prima Say It with Pearls flourishes. They are very old and they still work really well. I really like the Prima flourishes because they are easy to put on your page. Sometimes when I've bought the less expensive ones, when you take them off the plastic, they kind of flop, but these don't do that, and they're easier to work with, so that's just something that I like. I really like cutting these into smaller pieces and then tucking them in a couple of different places around the layout. I decided that I didn't need that leaf on the upper left-hand corner, so I trimmed that off. I'm going to put it back on the layout again, but it just was in the wrong spot. I put a small flourish or swirl underneath the title, and I added another line of pearls that I had after I cut this whole piece into smaller pieces. And then I was having a little bit of trouble deciding where to put that last flourish, so I placed it off to the side. I stuck down the flourish that's on the right, and then I found a spot for that other line of pearls. And then I returned the leaf to the layout. I just put it in a different spot in the same cluster. And then I thought I was done with the layout, and I took pictures of it, and I took close-ups, and then I realized I forgot to add butterflies, which I really wanted to add. I tried a few different types and I liked this butterfly by Recollections, so I put 3 of these white butterflies on the page, and they have silver jewels in the middle, but I think they still went along with the layout. And that completes this layout. Here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I want to say thank you so much to everybody, and I really, really appreciate the support that you've shown my channel. Thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. In the description box, you'll find links to the ladies who play along with A Punched Out Thursday to Die For, and also all the channels of all the scrapbookers who are following along with Christy's Beautiful Life, 30 Days of Sketches. I hope to see everybody again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.